The mid to late 90s were a magical time for industrial music. It was becoming far more prevalent due to the rise of bands like Nine Inch Nails. Marilyn Manson was starting to get started at the time and really gained popularity. 1995 saw the release of Sweet Dreams, which was a huge hit. And while Marilyn Manson sort of took a step away from that kind of traditional industrial music sound, Antichrist Superstar, his follow-up album in 1986, sort of capitalized on that. So you had industrial becoming a lot more popular, a lot more prevalent in the mainstream consciousness. In particular, the Quake soundtrack by Trent Reznor is one of the best video game soundtracks of all time. As brilliant and as groundbreaking as Mick Gordon's soundtrack for the recent Doom reboot was, the Quake's one soundtrack by Trent Reznor at the time there was nothing else like it at the time. It was dark and menacing, and Reznor's own influence, which was, if you don't know, Nine Inch Nails and Trent Reznor himself are heavily influenced by early Coil, another founding figure in the industrial music scene, featuring John Balance and Peter Christopherson, and very experimental sort of music. And the Quake soundtrack is really an extension of that influence, and it really shows.
You know, the first time I really took notice of Trent and Nine Inch Nails is with Quake. My uncle had Quake, and he would play it on his computer. I'd watch him. He'd let me play it. And of course, I was young at the time, and I probably shouldn't have been playing it, but I always played horribly violent video games anyway. And Quake was one of the first 3D first-person shooters that I got to play. I was playing Duke Nukem 3D and Doom and Wolfenstein, but Quake was the first actual 3D game. And it wasn't until a little bit later that I actually realized that Trent actually did the soundtrack. I thought it was more of a mod in the game. I thought people just modded in the Nine Inch Nails logo onto the nail boxes and stuff like that in the game. It was around that time where I first took notice of Nine Inch Nails, because I first heard March of the Pigs, and I love that song. And even though I heard Head Like a Hole and stuff like that previously, it wasn't until Quake and the Downward Spiral coming out that I was holy shit, I really love this sound. And it's just, ever since then, I've been a big Trent Reznor fan.